Yeah, no, let's be on two mics. Let's be on two mics, shall we?
I think I do.
He needs glasses? He needs his glasses. Aww. Sad but true.
All right then. Really nervous, you guys.
Well, because we've never done that. We've never talked. We're in this band, Dolly Varden, and I'm a visual artist, and so neither one of us normally has to make a coherent sentence in front of anyone. But for some reason, we got asked to do this, and what the hell?
All right. I drove to Chicago from Boston with my friend Nicholas in his mother's 1968 Ford Galaxy in September of 1987. I was 22 with gills of shiny green. We do this now. I'd been.
You feel like that.
You think? No, it's good. It's good right where it is. I was going to school in Boston, but Nicholas, who'd been living and playing music in Chicago, convinced me that Chicago was the place to be. I decided to give it a try. He had found an apartment for us on the first floor of a 2-flat in Wicker Park. He assured me it would be cool, and that the woman who owned the building, someone named Diane, was totally cool. She's an artist, a fucking painter, man, he said. 2 weeks prior to our drive, he had called me to say that I needed to send a second money order for the first month's rent because Diane had been mugged on her way to the bank with the first one I sent. I said, you know, Nicholas, Diane might be totally cool, but what sort of place have you moved us into? And he reassured me it was all going to be fine. I was nervous, but I went ahead and got a second money order and canceled the first one. I don't remember how that worked. Money orders. I don't know. I didn't have a checking account. I was 22.
You didn't have pubic hair, right? You had like 2 pubes.
You'll have your time. I had pubic hair.
Just no bank account.
Nicholas flew to Boston. We got his mom's car, and we packed up my stuff, and we headed toward Chicago. The Galaxy blew a tire somewhere along the Ohio Turnpike, and some kind-hearted gentleman helped us change it in a nasty downpour. That's about all I remember about that trip, except for other stories which I can't tell you right now. But you know.
Oh, I do know.
But we're not going to talk about that.
No.
The brakes weren't working well either. But we did make it to our new home in Wicker Park. The gunfire at night was slightly disconcerting, but whatever. I took the little room with the slanted ceiling below the stairs. Probably it was a closet. I set up my foam pad and my tiny bookcase, and that, along with my guitar, was everything I owned at the time, and I was perfectly happy. I must have met Diane, but honestly, I don't remember. She seemed really busy, moving really fast with no time to talk. So I didn't really have much of an impression of her other than, oh, that's the lady who owns this house. The appliances were kind of crappy, honestly, but better than some of the dumps I lived in, but not 100% functional. I told Nicholas that it was kind of bullshit that we had to use a match to light the burners on the stove, and he told me it's not a big deal, but I insisted that we take it up with Diane. So we called her into the apartment and explained that we would like to have a stove where the burners turned on when you turned the switch. And she said, for the rent you're paying, you can light your own fucking stove with a match. This was literally my first conversation with Diane. and I was outraged. I told Nicholas we should look into legal recourse and that there were free advocates available for tenants' rights issues. And he talked me down.
I read that, and I just have to say I'm here to set history straight, kind of. It's ancient history, but I think I remember this correctly. True, one of the 3 muggings I had experienced, in one of the 3 muggings, young, fresh-faced Steve Dawson's money order had been forcibly taken from me. I admit, that's true. But in defense of my behavior, Your Honor, Your Honor, my experience was that I remember opening the door of my sketchy neighborhood house to this handsome, fresh-faced, adorable guy, and I thought, holy fuck, I better keep my distance. Better yet, I better drive him away from the get-go. So I mustered all of my considerable bitchy energy, and I treated him like shit in every single interaction. Now, I should note that I don't know who you are, but that's how I feel about this too. Every single interaction that Steve wrote down on our first time made me think, what the hell? As he's recounting this, I'm thinking, this should have stood out as a sign to you, some kind of burning bush screaming at you to run for the hills, but for some unknown reason, he misinterpreted these first signs, and he's hung around for nearly 30 years. What the fuck?
Diane swears a lot, I'm sorry. Your mother would be really upset. You guys will edit that when you put it on the internet. All right, so a few months later, I had some reason to go upstairs and talk to Diane and her roommate, Barb. Barb, by the way, was really nice to me she was very sweet. I did not marry Barb. Diane was wearing a 1950s style long, dark green dress and very red lipstick. That is how I remember it. In the flash of a second, she pulled up the bottom of her dress, past her knee, to reveal something written on the inside of her thigh, written with a black marker, staffing with the nuns. I felt like Jimmy Stewart in Vertigo when he looks down from the top of the tower. I didn't realize that Diane would become my wife of 25 years, the mother of our child, the person I will travel the world singing songs with, my soulmate, the only person who's ever really gotten me, the person who supported me and hung in with me, the person I admire most as a creative force of nature and a woman with a tender, loving, honest heart. I only knew then that my caveman brain was telling me I had to get to know this person who'd scrawled staffing with the nuns on her inner thigh with a magic marker much, much better. Your turn.
Okay, there's totally a good explanation for this staffing with the nuns deal, Your Honor. Okay. I know that sounds so dirty.
You're not being judged.
I know. I feel judged because this all sounds so shitty. But anyway, so at the time, well, in my infinite wisdom, I had decided to go to 2 graduate schools at one time, concurrently, beginning to end, at the time that I met Steve. And at the time that he entered my life, I was about as overwhelmed and sleep deprived as a person could be. Add to that addled scenario, I had a new placement as a social work intern in a South Side locked psychiatric ward. Suffice to say, I was dog paddling in terms of functioning, but the one thing I'd learned at this internship was that you were never to carry a clipboard or a pen onto the ward unless you were in the locked room where you were actively interviewing someone for a formal interview. Why? Because these things could be used as weapons. So you had your keys clipped to your belt, my 1950s dress. I always tried to wear things to my knees to, hide any sort of bipedal sexuality. So
say bipedal again.
Sounds sexy, doesn't it? So somehow in this hot mess, I was given the instruction to attend a staffing with the nuns who worked in the hospital. So I'm on the ward with nothing to write with, and they said, staffing with the nuns tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And I thought, my brain can't retain this because I haven't had more than 3 hours of sleep in 2 weeks. So I went to the clipboard at the base of one of my psychiatric patients' beds, and with that Sharpie, wrote on the inside of my thigh, staffing with the nuns. Wasn't supposed to be sexy. So I grabbed that Sharpie from the patient's chart, and I wrote it, where I would never find it unless I bathed, which I rarely did. And that's...
So this doesn't answer why you hiked it up while I was standing there.
Probably because I went like this or something. I mean, I wasn't like going, hey, want to see this? I mean, it wasn't intentional. Nobody's proud when they write something on their inner thigh with a Sharpie, are they? I'm not proud of that. It was a low-functioning moment.
As we examine this further, there's more questions. There's unanswered questions. We will need to revisit this later. A few months later, after I'd begun my transition to living upstairs, Diane brought home...
Wouldn't you want to move in with that person? I mean, why?
It's worked out. Diane brought home an LP of Orange Juice Jones with the song I Saw You Walking in the Rain on it. She particularly liked and often quoted parts of the song where Juice says, "You're just a squirrel looking for a nut," or "I missed you so much I followed you." In fact, she still quotes those lines. And I didn't know the song, I just thought those were things that Diane just said. I said, well, she's really weird and funny. Anyway, she took a magic marker. I'm not sure if it was the same staffing with the nuns marker.
Not the same marker. That one came from the psych ward. It stayed there.
Anyway, okay, so she wrote across the LP, "Here's your fucking birthday present." And she packed it up and addressed it to her sister. Your turn.
No, you said here. Should I have seen this?
Yeah, I did write. I was going to leave that up, but I wrote, "Should I have seen this as a sign?"
Get out, man. Get while the going's good. Okay. Yeah, this should have really sent him hightailing, don't you think? But whatever. Okay, just to explain. At this time, there's a totally good explanation. At this time, I was only listening to R&B and soul music on the radio. It's like
What station would that have been?
I can't remember, but I know it had 2 8s in it. I mean, I just.
Chicago.
Oh no, it was Chicago, and it was, it was the only thing I listened to. I don't know why. Now this song is pure genius. You guys will agree, right? That's true. But the reason for the purchase of the record is a pretty convoluted story. I had just had a truly, truly hideous visit to my often bossy eldest sister's home on Mount Hood in Oregon. I don't know if anyone's had those kind of visits to a sibling's house where you're treated like shit and yet you're also invited. No? Yes? No? Okay. But for some reason, after this minor or major trauma, I still felt compelled to send her a birthday gift, knowing that if I was liking her at the time, I would have wanted her to hear this song. I bought the record and I wrote on it in Sharpie, "Here's your fucking birthday gift." And for some unknown reason, after seeing that and seeing me mail it to my sister, the wonderful Steve Dawson continued to fall in love with me. And even though I was the harpy that wrote that and then sent it off, because you wanted those kind of gifts for like the next however many years, written like, "Fuck you, here's, fuck you, happy anniversary."
That's true.
Yeah, so fuck you is what I'm saying.
Diane swears a lot, by the way. All I can say is I'm glad I wandered upstairs that day that Diane used to rent her thigh as a post-it note.